CBS 12, CBS 4, and the Colorado Sun. I'm your host, Dominic Dezzutti. Thank you so much for joining us. Joining me is John Frank from the Colorado Sun and political analyst Eric Sondermann. We continue our look at the major initiatives on November's ballot. Tonight's debate will examine both sides of Proposition 117, a ballot issue that would require voter approval of new state enterprises that expect to bring in more than $100 million in fees over the first 5 years. Joining us for the next 30 minutes are Michael Fields, Executive Director of Colorado Rising State Action, in support of the measure, and Scott Wasserman, President of the Bell Policy Center, opposing the measure. Gentlemen, thank you so much for being here. For all of our viewers, this is the kickoff of a great fiscal block here, taking this debate, then we'll go into the Gallagher Mem for the next half hour. So if you have any ideas and thoughts, concerns about the fiscal policy of Colorado, this is your night. You're going to enjoy it. Eric, let's get started with your first question.
Sure. We have two very glib and polished gentlemen here, so it should be a good half hour. Let's start with just the basics of why we're here. To you, Michael, what is the problem that this initiative attempts to fix or address, and how does it do so? And then you, Scott, what is wrong with it?
Yeah, so basically what's been going on for several years now is that the legislature has been going around our taxpayers' Bill of Rights, which allows us to vote on tax increases, debt increases. And if they label something a fee, then they don't have to go get voter approval. And so what we said was, you know, if it's going to be $100 million or more over 5 years, a big number, that they have to go and ask voters for approval. And so things like our car registration has gone up, our health insurance has gone up. They just label it as a fee. And so we said voters should weigh in on that. The original intent of the Taxpayers' Bill of Rights wanted us to vote on those types of things. And so that's why we're supporting this. And Scott?
Sounds like good the way he presents it. What's wrong with it?
I think that what's wrong with it is that it's a solution in search of a problem. I mean, if you look, first of all, I think it's really important to make the distinction between a fee and an enterprise. Those are two different things. Tabor envisions the creation of what are called enterprises. These are user-related businesses that are operated by the state of Colorado. We currently have 15 enterprises in the state. These include mundane things like the tuition that students pay to colleges in the state of Colorado, the unemployment trust fund, that is the payments that employers make for unemployment. And what we're really talking about is, should these enterprises, should these mundane activities of state government eclipse all of the money that's coming into the state? We collect $11 billion worth of tuition in the state between all of our public colleges. That's almost the entire state general fund. Had we not exempted college tuition from the state budget, we would have crowded out everything else Coloradans care about. So really, you know, this is about enterprises, not fees, and this is about tying the hand of government where there really is no problem.
John, get in the action. What's your first question?
Michael, pick up on that theme for me. What Scott's saying is this essentially would make Colorado's budget problems worse. That right now, lawmakers need some of this flexibility given the $3 billion in cuts they just made, the potential $1 billion in cuts they're going to make next year. Why is this not a tool lawmakers should have and need to get through this recession?
Sure. So I think one thing to clarify is we're not stopping enterprises from happening at all. They still could be outside of the Tabor cap, which we're talking about. And it was really used for good things in the beginning. University system, the parks, the lottery, legitimate things. What we're concerned about are the things that it's moving towards. And so, looking at, we're going to create a new program. This isn't anything local. It's nothing in the past. But if you're going to create a new program, and I just think you need buy-in from the people. And this is one of the tools that the legislature, I think, has abused over time. And they're going to say, look, we're going to raise your health insurance costs and put, an extra 1% on it, which really has an impact on people's lives. During a recession, we need to make sure that people are in control over what additional revenues that the government gets, if it's going to be a big amount.
When you talk health insurance costs, you're referring to the reinsurance program, which applied fees to other folks? Is that what you're?
Yeah, so reinsurance was existing already. What they did was they created an enterprise this last year in order to help fund that. But it was on 1 million Coloradans are having higher health insurance costs because of it.
And Scott, to Michael's point, do you think any restraints are needed on fees? I mean, is there a certain benchmark that's reasonable, and why isn't this it?
Well, I think for starters, we have benchmarks and we have parameters. I mean, I think our state laws and our Constitution, in fact, Tabor is quite specific. There's a 3-part test to determine what can qualify as an enterprise that's counted outside of the revenue that the state collects. So, currently through our legal system, we do have accountability and benchmarks in place. I think the question here is how much do we want to politicize these issues? Because by definition, a fee is something that not everyone pays. A fee is different than a tax. Tax everybody pays. Fee is something that is specific to the user of a service. Great example that comes to mind that I think is something we should think about is the Petroleum Storage Tank Fund, right? This is an enterprise under the state. It's funded to essentially clean up old storage tanks. The only people that pay the fee for the storage tank fund are people involved in the movement and storage of petroleum. That is an enterprise, by the way, that would qualify, that's over $100 million over 5 years. Should that be something that's on the state ballot? One can only imagine what the petroleum industry would do if the Petroleum Storage Tank Fund was on the ballot in this political climate. So I think the real question is why do we want to make these very specific, technical, user-based issues politicized fights where big money can come in and really distort the issue?
Let me get into the action as well. Our friends at the Academy for Lifelong Learning helped make this show possible, and they have a question for each of you. Michael, we're going to start with you. Just last week we were talking about the national popular vote, and we heard a lot of conversation between a democratic republic and a direct democracy. Tabor, Taxpayer Bill of Rights, already has us vote on taxes. If we're voting on fees, are we not simply moving to more of a direct democracy and not a republic?
Yeah, so I would say that we're not. The legislature has over 500 bills per year that they, debate, and they have a lot of say in how money is spent, where the general fund money goes, et cetera. I think they have more than enough work to do over that period of time. What we're saying is under Tabor and with this thing is saying if you're going to increase fees or taxes by a lot, that we want voters to have approval of it. And if you're going to grow government, if you're going to take more money, and we're not telling you exactly how to spend it, I think that would get closer to direct democracy. But the people, and it's very popular. That part of Tabor is very popular, and so people don't mind voting a little bit longer on their ballot. Ours is longer than other states, but they appreciate that if they're going to be taking more of their money, things that are going to impact our #1 economy, that they want to stay on that. And so I think this is just following along with Tabor, the really popular part of Tabor.
Scott, this question is a little bit broader, but the whole idea of debrucing Tabor and addressing this kind of a situation one way or the other, have been very popular in local communities. A lot of local communities have debruced themselves, but it has not been very successful at the state level. Why has making the case of debrucing elements of the state budget been such a problem when it's been successful on the local level?
Well, I think it is very tempting to believe that the taxpayers voting on every single fiscal question before our legislature is the right way to run a democracy. I think Colorado should ask themselves. We've been in a failed experiment for 25 years, voting on issues that we know people care about. We know people care about transportation. We know people care about education. And yet, we have not been able to fund those things. And so I think what it has shown is that we're not living in a pure direct democracy. We're not living in a Swiss canton. What we're living in is a highly politicized environment in which big money, dark money can come in, completely distort the issues, and make these issues very different than they are. I would disagree quite intensely that the legislature has much decision-making authority when it comes to how dollars are allocated. Constitution requires that money is allocated a certain way for education, money is allocated a certain way for other priorities. In fact, the only thing that is not required to be funded is higher education. And we are basically on the brink of shutting down public colleges in this state in spite of having the #1 economy. I think Coloradans are tired of living in a state that has this great economy, but poor schools, but poor transportation. We know these are priorities. Clearly, the way we've set up the system and putting one more set of questions on the ballot is only going to make it harder to fund the things that we all need.
Eric, let's go back to you for your questions.
Let me follow up, and a question for each of you. I'll start with Scott on this one. I mean, per this last dialogue, I think you used a reference of a failed experiment for the last 25 years. If it is indeed a failed experiment, why aren't you and people of similar mind, why are we voting this year on a wholesale repeal of the Taxpayer Bill of Rights, if indeed it is a failed experiment and if indeed the evidence is that conclusive. Just to add to that, the piece that voters most associate with the Taxpayer Bill of Rights is the right to vote on these major issues. And so the question is, why not just ask on these major enterprise issues?
Sure. Well, I mean, first of all, when I say failed experiment, what I mean, if your goal is to shrink government in the bathtub, to drown government in the bathtub, then by all means, we should definitely continue with these kinds of policies. I think for folks in this state who are frustrated, who want to see better schools, who want to see better roads, they're getting tired of these political games to make it harder and harder for their elected representatives to do what they want them to do. I think regarding Tabor, you're absolutely right. When you say on the surface it sounds good to vote on your taxes, that sounds great. What people don't understand about Tabor is that it eliminates the possibility of a fair tax code. It eliminates a lot of other things that people want. And even in this debate, Michael and his campaign talk about, well, you should be able to vote on fees. Well, this really isn't about fees. This is about enterprises and whether or not they should count against an arbitrary revenue cap. So these are really technical, complicated questions. This is why we send people to the state capitol who are trying to operate government on our behalf. Absolutely, the bumper sticker, you should be able to vote on taxes and fees, sounds great. In practice, over the last quarter century, what has it done for us?
And to Michael, maybe one of these years we will have this big global debate instead of just debating around the edges. But as long as we're around the edges, talk about some of the specific things that Colorado voters are likely to face in the next few election cycles, specific decisions on fee increases if this passes.
Sure. So there's been a few that have been floated. One is that even the family leave program that is going to be on the ballot, which I'm happy that we're at least voting on it. But that was one that could have, and the bill was in the legislature to basically go around that vote and just pass it by itself. They couldn't put the coalition together, and that's why it's on the ballot. But even if it fails, that could be something that comes back in a different form or in a similar form. There's also been talk about a gas fee, which is really a gas tax. They are concerned they can't go to the people and increase it. And to the point that Scott made earlier, this is not a user base where I'm going into the park, I give them $5, and they say this is going to go to help the park maintain it. These are things like riding your car, health insurance, things that aren't really choices that these fees are being put on. But another one is potential a carbon fee that could come. The one group that's opposing this measure is an environmental group that says we want oil and gas to pay more. So knowing that this is going to be a target, and we don't know what other businesses could be under the target over the next few years.
But this is I think this is a great example. Michael just mentioned transportation. This state has struggled mightily to figure out how to fund transportation against the backdrop of an underfunded school system and a lot of other funding pressures. This is something that our legislators need to get done. Can you imagine the food fight, the political food fight that will ensue when we talk about creating, say, some sort of user fee or a toll system for our highways? That would absolutely exceed the limit, and now we would have big oil fighting against electric vehicles. I think we have to ask ourselves, why do we continue to tie the hands of our elected representatives? If they do something that violates the spirit of Tabor, that's why we have a court system, right? That court system can weigh in and say whether or not that paid family leave fee is legal and should be an enterprise in the state of Colorado. And if we really don't like what our elected representatives are doing at the state capitol, we can vote them out. At the end of the day, we have to ask ourselves if requiring all of these things to go to the ballot. Questions, voters find, by the way, this question to be incredibly confusing when they read the ballot language, and I don't blame them, right? Because even the language, how many of your viewers know what an enterprise is? How many esoteric terms have we used in this debate today? So the question is do we want to keep loading the ballot up with technical, complicated, esoteric questions that voters look at, scratch their head, and say, I don't know?
And I would just push back on the fact that you called Colorado a failed experiment economically over the years. We have the #1 economy in the country, and I think that's for a reason. We do have challenges. We have a transportation challenge. We have education challenges, and I think we need buy-in from voters in order to come up with plans on this. Having a legislature, and this is something that I agree with you, that a lot of these terms people don't know about. We can't even tell you, hey, you want big fees, and it has to go through the title board and comes up with a confusing ballot language. When you explain it to people, you say this is voting on big fees, and you explain what kind of programs it is, it's very popular. And so that's our job over the next few months.
Michael, you really think we have the #1 economy? We have some of the most based upon U.S. News World Report looking at 5 categories. My point here is that we have major needs. We have the worst paid teachers in the country. We came in 51st. To suggest that Colorado you're drinking your own Kool-Aid.
Let's get more into questions, John.
Yeah, Scott, let's just dive right back in because to Michael's point, lawmakers can pass these fees, and it often happens at the last minute. This reinsurance deal that referred to came through at the last minute of the legislative session. Not many people knew what was in it until after the dust settled, after the session ended. So do you believe that lawmakers have abused their power to levy fees? And, what needs to change about the system to prevent a situation like that last one?
I mean, I don't believe... I mean, again, that's why I say this is. I mean, if you look at us, compared to other states, 14% of our total revenue is user fees. That's lower than Utah. That's lower than South Carolina. That's lower than Kansas. These are not liberal bastion states, right? So we're not overusing fees as a part of our budget. And like I say, the people to determine whether or not there's abuse occurring, there's a legal system. If Michael and Colorado Rising Action believe that hospital provider fee is an inappropriate fee, they should pursue that in the legal system, or they should make it an issue in candidate elections so that we can vote those elected officials out. What I see is our elected representatives problem solving, needing tools, and using the tools that are made available to them. And enterprises are absolutely a tool envisioned even by Douglas Bruce, the father of Tabor, right? He envisioned the need to take some of the dollars out of that accounting so that we could actually fund priority services. And it's interesting to me that this is a statutory change. So now we're going to have state statute adding one more requirement, and I wonder if that's even constitutional.
And Michael, real quickly, let's cut to the chase. Isn't this about just shrinking the size of government? Isn't that what you're after here?
No, it is managing how big government gets, right? So we're not talking about getting rid of anything that happens in the past. We're not shrinking government at all. Government is growing bigger than ever. We run into a recession, but before that, I mean, $1 billion every year was going up in the state budget. Basically, all we're saying is we just want people to weigh in on this. Do you agree with what Scott is saying or not? And the courts have weighed in, and we want to say, look, we want to put it up to the people. Do they think this amount is a good amount in order to do it? And these programs and the things that they're taxing, which are not just strictly user-based things that you have to have, should voters weigh in on that? And that's all and people will decide, and we think that's a good process.
Let me jump in with a couple of questions. Michael, one of the things that Tabor's given us is the ability to vote on taxes, and that feels very empowered for Coloradans. But the other fact of the matter is we spend a lot of money as a state on elections, and then a lot of money goes into elections, both pro and con, and then there is the cost of the time, even if it is a policy that most Coloradans want to see, that it ever gets enacted because we've got to wait for the next election cycle. Is there a problem with going to have more things going to an election with more resources going to that, and in the end, maybe not even seeing those happen? Are we not really handcuffing more levels of state government with being forced to go to the election, especially with various seasons involved?
Yeah, I think it's a valid point to talk about, the cost of elections and the campaigns and everything else, which is one of the reasons why we made this state-based and not localities, where a lot of these things happen on the local level. I think the cost of the legislature continuing to go after certain businesses or go after us on different things is a much higher cost. And I think, people, and I hope legislators are careful on what they decide to put on the ballot if they want to do an enterprise, that I think that there should be a deliberative process. They should think about what campaigns are going to run for and against it, what that's going going to look like, and can they get the buy-in from the people? And so I think the cost of not doing this is greater than the cost of doing it.
Well, Dominic, I mean, if I may, let's ponder who's paying the cost of these elections. In the case of this measure, as well as its twin, which is a irresponsible tax cut that's also going to be on this year's ballot, we have dark money organizations basically spending millions of dollars, completely unaccountable. Ultimately, who's paying the cost of this are billionaires. If you want to run a campaign in this state, you've got to go out and ask Kent Thiry or some billionaire to fund your campaign. That's who ultimately is winning in time. And I think that, Eric, I kind of think that this gets to your question, which is, on the surface, the bumper sticker looks good. Vote on your taxes. The question is who wins in that environment and whose benefit is it for? And I'll tell you, many of these enterprises are, I go back to the petroleum storage tank fund, because it's about charging fees for polluters or users of certain industrial services, right? So we are now creating an environment in which voters will be inundated with all kinds of rhetoric and political communication that may completely distort the issue. And I think that's what we've seen over the last 25 years. And I go back to, if we lived in a pure direct democracy where we all gathered in the town hall and argued back and forth, that's not what's happening. What's happening is big money is being spent, and it's benefiting people with big money.
We've got about 3 minutes before our closing statement. So, Eric, I'm going to go to you for a question and then ask gentlemen to offer a shorter answer as we get close on time. Eric?
Quick question to each of you. Name the 2 or 3 big endorsements, newspapers in particular, or other large statewide organizations that have come to your side. Michael?
Yeah, so we have a lot of groups like the Independence Institute, American for Prosperity. We also started doing the endorsement rounds, and so Durango Herald just came out and endorsed us. And so we'll see. I think this is one of those issues that's getting a little bit pushed to the back, in terms of newspapers, et cetera. And so we expect to get more support on this as time goes on.
I think what we're seeing is opposition coming from school districts, coming from teachers, coming from chambers of commerce, contractors who build.
Are chambers on record opposed to this?
My understanding is that the Denver Metro Chamber is opposing this, and I think we'll start to see other chambers. The bottom line is the people that are opposing this are the stakeholders, the people who will ultimately be impacted because we cannot find the revenue to fund the priorities that we need to fund. So I think endorsement season is just beginning, but I think what we are seeing is that the people that he likes to call special interests, but are actually the stakeholders and citizens of the state and those organizations that represent them, oppose this kind of measure.
John, a quick question as we get to wrap up.
A quick look forward. If this fails, Michael, do you anticipate bringing it back? Is this that important of an issue?
Yeah, I would. I think when you look at it, the reason that this would not pass is because of the confusing ballot language and that we had to put on there. I think when you make the case that people are with us, and so I think it would definitely come back because I think it's needed.
And Scott, you have a different ballot measure in mind for the future. Very quickly, what do you think is a better system than adding more requirements for fees?
Any system other than the one we have. Look, we have a very unfair tax code in this state, and it is a product of many things. We have to stop talking about fiscal reform in this state, which is boring, esoteric, and completely not resonating with people in the state. What we need to start talking about is tax fairness. Who is paying for what, and are we providing the kinds of services that people rely on for a thriving state? And so the question is, how do we have an adequate funding stream in this state, and how do we make sure that the wealthy who can afford it are paying for it?
Well, it is now time for our closing statements. A half hour goes by very quickly in this studio. We offer each of our representatives 30 seconds to conclude their argument. A coin flip before the program determined that Michael would go first. Michael, your 30-second closing statement.
Well, I think this is a very important issue for Colorado, even though it might not get as much attention as others. The Vote on Fees initiative, voting on big state fees when they're trying to go around our taxpayers' real rights, is important. It's letting voters decide. It's letting voters participate in this process, and I think it's a good thing. Fees are up 4 times the general fund over the last, since Tabor passed, and so I think this is an important one that the voters should be able to weigh in on, and I hope you vote yes on Prop 117 when you get your ballot.
Michael, thank you very much. Scott, it's now your turn for your 30-second closing statement.
Yeah, I mean, these are really big choices, and these are really big, complicated topics. I think the question is are Coloradans happy living in a so-called #1 economy while they have underfunded schools, underfunded roads, and has 25 years of Tabor served us well in terms of having the kind of state we want? And so at the end of the day, I think the question is are we tired of these kinds of games being played on the ballot? And do we want to tie our elected representatives' hands when they're actually trying their best to give us the kind of state that we keep asking them for? By voting for Proposition 117, you're going to tie our legislature's hands, and you're going to make it harder to fund and service the needs of our state. Vote no on Proposition 117.
Well, that is indeed all the time we have for our debate about the voter approval of fees in Colorado. I'd like to thank our issue representatives, both Michael Fields and Scott Wasserman. I'd also like to thank my fellow panelists, John Frank and Eric Sondermann. If you would like to find out more information about any of this year's general election issues and races, please visit our websites, pbs12.org, cbsdenver.com, and coloradosun.com. Stay tuned because our fiscal issue double feature continues with a debate looking at the proposed repeal of the Gallagher Amendment. And next week, two very important debates. At 7 p.m., we'll host a debate about the proposed 22-week abortion ban, and at 7:30, we'll take a look at the paid family leave proposal. And this is just part of the big election season that is here on PBS 12. You'll see all these different debates on all the partner websites. Be sure to get all the updates that you're going to be able to see from John Frank and all of his colleagues at the Colorado Sun. And every Friday at 7 and 7:30, you'll be seeing different debates between now and, frankly, with our partner series, Both Sides of the Story, and high school students taking on issues just like this. We'll have something for you every Friday at 7 and 7:30, all the way through to till Thanksgiving. That means we're going way past Election Day because there's a lot of issues that are still worth talking about in Colorado. If you're looking to be a better informed voter, PBS 12, the Colorado Sun, and CBS 4 is where you need to be. And we want to thank all of you that helped making this possible. We do not take this service for granted that we're able to provide for the state of Colorado and our entire community. All of our members, supporters of the Sun, viewers of CBS 4, and all the members here at PBS 12 have made this possible. So thank you for being a part of that and for being all these informed voters that we're excited to serve throughout the entire state. For everybody here at PBS 12 and Colorado Sides, I'm Dominic Dezzutti. Thank you so much for watching.